Today, there's
24-year-old Rod Stewart found a group of rocking soulmates in the fall of '69 when he joined forces with Ron Wood, Kenny Jones, Ian McLaughlin, and Ronnie Lane.
I don't need no words opinion on the matter concerning my dress.
They called their rowdy new rock and roll drinking society the Faces.
We had a real free living band. It's all great guys having a great time producing marvelously ragged music. Dishing out crates of wine or champagne instead of having a backing group, we'd get the audience in the same state we were in, you know.
We consumed so much alcohol, I can't remember, to be honest. It really was fun. Not only for us on stage, but for the audience. It was really like a giant party.
And others may come and the others may go, but that's soon to be around wherever you're going.
The Faces were a wild band. When you went out with them, it was like, you better fasten your seatbelts, because it was going to be a bumpy night.
Not only they're playing great music, they're having a great time as well. And you used to think, which one's going to fall over first?
We were loose. That's what people loved about us. We got drunk last night, let's get drunk again tonight, and let's get more drunk. And so there was a lot of falling about, but we managed to keep it together.
Street button, hand me down.
Keeping the Faces together would not be easy.
There was one stumbling block. Before I joined the Faces, I'd already signed a solo recording deal. So I had to make solo records, and they knew that going in.
On the one hand, he had this great kick-ass rock and roll band behind him. And on the other hand, he was doing these almost folky albums.
Just months after joining the Faces, Rod released his first solo album with the help of Ron Wood.
He needs a kick up the arse from me, and that's what I give him. And when I give him it, he sings excellent.
We weren't anticipating great sales at all. I love the album, but, you know, I thought this is too off the wall.
The album failed to chart in the UK, but it reached number 139 in the US.
I remember I got a phone call from the record company. They said, "You've sold 50,000 albums." I went, "Do what? 50,000 albums? There's 50,000 people like my voice. That's amazing."
A year after his modest debut, Rod released a soulful second solo album in the fall of '70. Gasoline Alley cracked the US top 30 and impressed the critics as well.
I was very aware of the blues and very aware of American folk music, and, you know, being British and that whole combination was extraordinarily interesting, and I think that's what the critics got onto.
I think I know now what's making me sad. It's a unit for my whole backyard.
Those albums are good. They're just humble, honest albums.
Humble albums is a good word because we didn't know what we were doing. We were just making as good songs as we thought we could do.
The Faces' first album had also met with moderate success that year, but there was concern within the band that Rod was more interested in his own records.
I don't think we had a lot of good quality songs. I mean, basically, the songs were ending up on Rod's album, all the good songs.
The second Faces album outsold the first, easing some of the band's fears. And as their popularity grew, so did their legion of female fans.
We attracted fantastic women. Most of the audience were women. There was models there and film stars backstage and God knows what, you know.
There used to be all these great girls, party girls, and, "Oh, I saw Jimmy Page last night, you know, now I'm with you."
I was like any red-blooded male, I suppose. I was enjoying my so-called stardom and enjoying what it brought, which was inevitably girls, and why turn it down, you know?
Londoner Dee Harrington was shocked by the flocks of groupies.
Herds of women arrived, all sort of done up and glittery stuff on, and Rod seemed to sort of peel women off him. And then he came and asked me to dance, and that was the beginning of our relationship.
Rod and Dee became a regular item, but Rod had a more fleeting affair in mind when he wrote a song called Maggie May for his third solo album.
Maggie did exist. She was the first one I ever had sex with, and I was probably around, I would say, 16. She must have fancied me because she just dragged me inside her tent, and I put it in, and it lasted about 20 seconds.
Rod's song would have far more staying power.
Wake up, Maggie, I think I got something to say to you.
Ironically, Maggie May was on the B-side when the first single off Every Picture Tells a Story was released.
It was a disc jockey in Cleveland, I believe, that turned it over, and that was it.
But I feel I'm being used. Oh, Maggie, I couldn't have tried anymore.
In October of '71, both the single Maggie May and Rod's third album topped the charts in America and Great Britain.
My dad could walk down the street with his cigar and always go, "Oh, your son's at #1, Mr. Stewart." Yes, he certainly is. And he was very proud, very proud.
26-year-old Rod Stewart's life was changed forever.
All I needed was a friend to lend a guiding hand.
He was still Rod, but he had this huge, sudden rise in fame to deal with.
The Faces would have to deal with Rod's growing stardom, too.
It was not very nice to see for the first time when you get to a gig and you look, you know, the billing was Rod Stewart and the Faces instead of the Faces. It's like, well, we haven't got a separate singer, you know, it's a band.
You could sense going to a Faces show, the tension had set in. Yeah, there was this kind of what I would call the bubbling resentment that, you know, Rod's a big star and he's on the front page of the tabloids.
I think I came through it pretty unscathed. I don't think it changed me radically. I think when the money started coming in, now that may have changed me.
Rolling in royalties, Rod bought himself a royal mansion from an English lord.
He called me up and he said, come and have a look at a house I've bought. And I can see it as plain as anything, laying on the floor in the hallway with his arms and legs up, shouting, "It's all mine, it's all mine."
He was really conscious about the fact that this was such a vast place and we could just never find each other. We were a very new relationship. We moved on January the 1st at the beginning of the year, and we'd only met in the summer of that year.
As 1972 rolled around, Rod Stewart was now living among rock's elite.
Rod became very successful in America about the same time as me, probably a little bit before. Rod and I have always had this intense rivalry, but at the heart of it, we've also had this incredible friendship.
Rod's wave of success swept up the Faces, and as their third album went top 10, their perpetual party kicked into high gear.
I look at what bands get up to nowadays and I think, hold on a minute, we've done all that before. You know, the old hotel thrashing and all those things, everything. And we were like a family. You know, we were really close mates for 3 or 4 years.
With and without the Faces, Rod Stewart was an established superstar by 1975, and his elevated status would bring personal and professional changes.
I had to leave the UK because the taxation in those days, you know, was, I think, about 88 cents in the dollar. You know, it was terrible.
But when 30-year-old Rod began his new life in Los Angeles in the spring of '75, he left behind girlfriend Dee Harrington.
I wanted to grow as a person, and he really didn't ever like me doing anything. He used to say to me, "You can't go out to work because everybody will say, 'Look at that man in that great white house. He sends his wife out to work.'" And then really, you know, he was going to become a tax exile, and it seemed like a natural breaking point had come along.
Soon after Rod and Dee broke up, he took up with another blonde, Swedish film star Britt Ekland.
We make pretty photographs, don't we? We come out very well.
She was a great girl. She is, you know, a good rock and roll spirit to her. You know, she was older than me, which made a change for me to be going out with an older woman. But changing the subject quickly,
We are not married, and perhaps that's got something to do with it.
Are you going to?
Well, that's up to prompt. We don't know yet. We haven't.
It's not in the plans right now.
He really needed to sort of go off and have some sort of glamorous woman to be with.
It changed Rod a bit, I should think, because he'd bagged a film star, you know, and then he had his own dressing room. That's when things went, oh, well, he's got his own dressing room. Maybe that's because Brit's in there, you know.
Celebrating his move to America, Rod released a solo album entitled Atlantic Crossing in the summer of '75.
for the first time ever, I was using American musicians, recording in America, and that's I called the album Atlantic Crossing because I'd moved to the States.
Atlantic Crossing was a top 10 smash stateside, and record label executive Mike Gill flew to the U.S. to award Rod with a platinum album.
I am sailing stormy waters.
All the other faces were there. You could have cut the atmosphere with a knife, and I thought, this is the end.
The real demise of the Faces was when Rod moved to America, so there was this transatlantic breakdown of communication.
By the end of the year, the Faces disbanded. Now and for the rest of his career, Rod would front for no one but himself.
Even when Maggie May was huge in 1971, wanted to stay with the band, I don't think I ever did convince them. I always wanted to be a band member, and I swear from my heart, that's all I wanted to be. If I'd have been a member of the Faces for the rest of my life, that would have been happy.
Oh, Lord.
Coming up, Rod's Disco Damnation.
Do you think I'm sexy? I thought, well, maybe I really am, you know.
It was Rod Stewart stretched out in spandex pants, and it made every guy think, well, he thinks he's hotter than me.
And later, Rod wanders the rock and roll wilderness.
I went through a period where I wasn't very creative, I think. I was partying and enjoying life as one must.
When Behind the Music continues.
Coming.
Girls, fix